We start off our conversation this morning by bringing you a roundup of some of the stories from East Africa. And we have Darren Bartlett, our journalist from East Africa, joining us this morning. Good morning, Darren. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning. How are you doing today?
Very well, thank you. Hope you're well as well.
Yeah, I'm good.
All right, Darren. Given the recent wave of terror attacks and cross-border crime, can you provide us with more details on the specific measures that Kenya will be taking to address the security concerns before considering the phased reopening of the border with Somalia?
Now, just to give you a small background about the borders of Kenya and Somalia, these borders have been closed for the last over 12 years, actually. And that is when, Kenya faced quite a lot of attacks from the Al-Shabaab. You saw attacks happening in a school in Garissa. There was also an attack on Westgate and a number of them. Even yesterday, in fact, the KDF had a battle with the Al-Shabaab, killing actually 30 of them. So even when they had planned to open these borders in a phased way, starting with the Madarissa, the one that was going to open in 30 days since they made this resolution in May, that means it was supposed to have opened up actually by June 30th, which didn't happen. And then there's also another border in Lamu that was supposed to be opened up around 30 days, quite enough. So yesterday, the Interior Minister, the cabinet secretary in the government of Kenya came out and said this is going to be delayed because of the security concerns that are happening on the border of Somalia and Kenya. Now, when you have to understand that what is happening in Somalia is that the Al-Shabaab have some territories that they actually took over where they even actually collect taxes. This is the most interesting bit. And they collect these taxes within the borders of Kenya and Somalia. And there have also been overlaps whereby people cross freely, and then there's not been some tight measures to kind of monitor who walks in, who walks out, especially on the porous borders. If you've ever gone to a border point, I don't know about Nigeria very well, but if you come to the East African parts of the borders, people who are always on foot are able to cross in a little bit freely. And without that much stringency there. But now, when they closed the borders, they didn't allow people to walk in as free as they wanted to, apart from those who had families across the border, and there had to be proof that they actually have families across the border, but just within a few kilometers here and there. So because of the attacks that have happened actually in the last month, which are over 15 attacks that have happened, seeing about 27 people die who are civilians, they feel like opening the border now may not be so safe because there's going to be high levels of insecurity. If there's insecurity right now when the borders are closed, what is then going to happen when the borders open? So what the government is going to do is to delay, and then they are going to create a mechanism of when you are walking into Kenya, you have to be thoroughly checked, especially by identification. We're going back to the times where you had to move with an LOC letter, which is a local council letter or a local defense mechanism. You have a letter that introduces you, who you are, where you're going, and then the Kenya government can then determine and have a right on whether you should actually come in or not. So what is being affected here now is trade, which we thought that when President Ruto comes in and had this conversation with the government, the new government of Somalia, that there would be open borders so that trade can move freely. Right now, trade happens, but in a very monitored way, a strict way that does not just allow things to happen the way they had wished they would happen as then. So yeah, this whole 30, 60, and 90 days phases of opening the border is going to be revised, and that will be communicated by the Interior Minister, Mr. Kindiki of Kenya there.
Well, I'm certain that they definitely have a lot of security concerns, with this. Even if, a lot of people might argue that borders or no borders, Al-Shabaab, of course, could still have done whatever it wanted to do, and it's really, really just heartbreaking. I always like that you expand a little bit further on the concept of them collecting taxes. They basically control certain regions and they tax businesses and individuals in those regions. Am I right? And it's not the only part of the continent where this is happening, is it?
Yeah. Yeah. Al-Shabaab actually does collect taxes from certain parts of Somalia. which actually neighbor Kenya, especially in the places of Lamu. So they get people, they just go get into shops and ask them to pay taxes for whatever business they are doing. And people end up complying. Now you may wonder, where is the security at this point? But like I said a few times back here on the Breakfast Central, Somalia is controlled by clans. And if you understand the politics of clans, which clan dominates the most, which clan is in power, and that's how they run the business. So you find that some clans actually work with the Al-Shabaab, they support their cause. So likely they will not inform security that we have this kind of problem that is going on here. So yes, Al-Shabaab has been collecting and still collects taxes in some parts of Somalia, especially at the neighboring places around the borders of Kenya.
Really scary.
All right, let's move away from Kenya to Burundi and see what's happening there. Burundi has walked out of the human rights treaty, right? The human rights review meeting. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are on what the impact of this would be on the country's reputation and its relationship with international organizations.
Well, that was one of the most unexpected moves that the Burundi officials did at the Human Rights Commission, where they do review the status of human rights in the country. And all the 15 members decided to walk out, and they cited that there are some criminals who are in the review meeting or the conference that is happening. And the person they say is a criminal here who they saw was actually a Burundian activist or a lawyer who has been defending activists in Burundi. They believe for them is a criminal that they cannot have a fair review process while he is there. Now, Burundi has seen quite a number of issues put on the table against them. Before President Evariste, of course, that was President Nkurunziza, who died in 2020. And here, when the president came into power, yes, he has tried to lift some bans that have been put on the activists in Burundi. We've seen some media houses reopened. We've seen about 4 journalists who were released when he came to power. We've seen some offices, especially one that monitors human rights activities in Burundi. But not all of them. But the human rights feel like this is just not enough, because only in 2022 and 2021 there were so many reports of still arrests of some opposition members. There were dead bodies that were seen all over some places in Burundi, and some people disappearing without accountability. Refugees have going to different countries, like even Tanzania, registering about 397 people who have crossed the borders or leaving Burundi. So they feel like even when President Evariste is in power, there's still some more that needs to be addressed, and they felt like, okay, fine, we have come to this table to put across what we think we have done, what we've tried to do versus what we needed to do before 2020. But having someone in our presence who does not believe in our systems and how we do our work doesn't make sense. And who they believe that actually also protects the criminals in the country of Burundi. So they felt this is not going to be a fair review process, and they walked away. So yeah, right now, most human rights, but you see, the thing is that they actually proceeded and they had the whole review process go ahead. But it leaves Burundi in a process whereby, first of all, the president, Evariste, is now the chairman of the East African Community, who is supposed to be overlooking at the things that are happening or issues that are happening in DRC, and also the refugee issues that are happening within the country. And now for him to let his people walk out of such a conference, it's like, I think we are not making any progress here. You're entrusted with lives of people, but we don't see much progress that is being happening versus the targets that he has been given as a country. So yeah, it remains tainted as an image of a country. It's tainted.
Okay, I want you to, if you can quickly share updates on the crisis in Sudan. Has there been any changes? We don't get to see a lot of those stories in the news anymore. It seems it's either the war is over or, it's just not important, news anymore. So do you have any updates on what's going on over there?
It's very unfortunate that the media walks on very fast to things that happen. Before you know it, there's an issue that is happening. I mean, the Titanic, the people who are dying the refugees who died right in the Mediterranean Sea, and so much so on going on within the continent. Yesterday, you see what happened in Tunisia, reports that were coming out of refugees being forced out. So all that kind of news covers what is happening in Sudan. But the truth is that the two parties have not come to an agreement, and we still see an influx of refugees running into other countries. As actually by Wednesday, I saw a report that showed about 60,000 people had already crossed into Ethiopia, and others were trying to make their way into Kenya. And whereas the shelling has reduced, but the two parties are not agreeing. The government and the ones who are posting, who are trying to find path or solutions to finding a government that is going to be stable. As a matter of fact, some are already running to South Sudan, where you would feel is actually less safe, given the crisis that is also going on in South Sudan. So Sudan has been left in the dark, but yes, they've kept on breaking the truces that have been signed all the time. They agree on a 72-hour, truce to say that there is no gunfight and all these things, but they break this code within the next 24 hours, and it keeps on happening. So it's a country yet to heal, and I'll keep following up on this.
All right, Darren, I want you also to share your thoughts very quickly on Kenya. Yesterday, we took the story about how President William Ruto has agreed to a 7 to 10% increase of salary for certain people and has rejected salary increments for political office holders like himself. And then we talked about the fact that even amidst all of these, Kenya is experiencing an intense increase in prices of goods and services. And we're wondering if this is something that the people would consider as a fair balance.
What Ruto is doing is he's trying to motivate the sectors that he feels have not been attended to for quite some time. In fact, yesterday the police officers who were passed out were guaranteed a salary increment, and some political figures were also guaranteed some increment, which you call this is motivation to stamp out corruption. Now, does it work? I would say yes, sometimes yes, because the police officers, if you look at the corruption report in the East Africa, police officers in Kenya are actually the most corrupt officers you would come across in the whole of the East Africa. And that is according to the report that is available. Now, and the issues they keep on raising is that they are less paid. I was in Kenya last week. I returned on Wednesday, and if you were speeding on the road and they got you speeding over maybe 100 kilometers per hour, because that is their limit, instead of prosecuting you or giving you a fine or something like that, what they will do is ask for kitu kidogo. Kitu kidogo means something small, which is a bribe. And for them, they feel like they're paid less, and yet they do the most. So one of the reasons is to enhance their salaries, especially police officers and also some political officials who believe that they handle key processes in the government, like handling money, making budgets, and making key decisions in the country, that once they are less paid, then they're likely to be mass corrupt. That was just the background. But I know the feeling in people generally is that we don't have money. The country is going down in terms of the currency. Actually, yesterday in a business report, it showed that the Kenyan shilling and the Zambian kwacha are losing relevancy or losing strength in the East African region. So when you look at such things, and then the cost of living is going high, and adding taxes on very key goods like fuel, where people thought that if fuel was cheaper, and then the cost of living is going to be lower. But if you're picking more taxes from the wananchi, who are the normal people, and giving it to some people who are in political offices, then it's just unfair for them. But again, when you look at it on the other side, is if you're motivating the right people to do the right job, and you're likely to eliminate the vices that are in there.
Okay. Interesting there. Of course, that's the story on the corruption in the police can be, copy and paste with what you can also find in Nigeria. It's basically. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. But of course, we hope that we continue to improve on, those aspects, of these countries across the continent. Darren, thank you so much for stopping by. We enjoy speaking with you as always.
Enjoy your day.
Absolutely. Have a great weekend.